Mark moment for African public health. South Africa is on the verge of producing its first vaccine from scratch in over 50 years. The Biovac Institute has received approval from SAHPRA to begin clinical trials for an oral cholera vaccine, a critical step in a project that aims to manufacture the vaccine entirely on South African soil. This development isn't just a scientific achievement, it is a beacon of hope for millions of people living in rural and underserved communities across the continent who are disproportionately affected by cholera outbreaks, driven by a lack of clean water and healthcare access. This represents the promise of a swift, locally driven solution to a deadly yet preventable disease. Dr. Morena Makhoana, CEO of Biovac, joins me. Morena, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for speaking to us. Now, let's talk about the significance of this milestone that Biovac is involved in.
Yeah, good morning, Hugo, and thank you for having me on your show. This is a historic moment, I think, not only for our company, but I think for the country. Vaccine development is difficult, it's expensive, it's tough. And so a lot of the vaccines that we use on a daily basis, where we give our children, we do flu vaccines or any other vaccine that you may come across, all of those were developed overseas, largely in the US and in Europe, and some also in India. And so they have a big thriving industry that really manufactures very many vaccines, from scratch. And hence they were able to respond even to the likes of the pandemic when the likes of South Africa were not able to respond to a pandemic fully. So with us developing this vaccine from scratch, this cholera vaccine from scratch, really ticks a few boxes, cholera being one in terms of the disease, but more broadly, it really just enables this capability that the country has so long been lacking of having end-to-end vaccine manufacture. So yeah, it's a great moment for us.
So suppose there are two issues here. The one issue is that we still have cholera, which is largely a result of absence of cleanliness or challenges that individuals face in accessing clean water. But in the event that there is an outbreak, we have this vaccine that's on the horizon that's not only impacting South Africans, but potentially will impact a lot of Africa.
Absolutely, Hugo. It's said that in 2025 that we're still talking about cholera in general, because to your point, it's really, if we have clean running water with good sanitation in many of our countries, cholera in itself would naturally not be there. So you actually ought not have a vaccine, because the other parts of the ecosystem ought to actually deal with the likes of cholera. But unfortunately, that's not the case as we said today. South Africa itself had exposure of cholera, I think, 18 months or 2 years ago. So we are not immune. We are quite vulnerable as a country, as much as we're a middle-income country. But in large parts of the continent, Hugo, and I don't think people realize it, that it's where we say that cholera is endemic, which means that it's there on a day-to-day basis. In many countries, it's there on a day-to-day, but also there are large outbreaks that we often see, throughout the year. We have those in DRC, we have those in Nigeria, but also in Asia, in Pakistan and Bangladesh. I mean, there's the cholera outbreaks a couple of times a year. So yeah, it's sad. And so, whilst we do need to look out for water and make sure that there's sanitation, but in the event of an outbreak, we need to respond. And the best tool to respond in that case is a vaccine.
All right, so let's talk about the phases. Phase one currently on the cards at the moment. What is happening? What is involved? Who's being tested? How do you determine who participates in these trials?
Yeah, I think it's important to also outline to the viewers that obviously if we go into clinical trials, this had to have the blessing and approval of the regulatory authority in South Africa, and that being the South African Health Product and Regulatory Authority. In short, it's called SAHPRA. So we had to develop the vaccine. SAHPRA had to come to our site in Cape Town to inspect the facility where this vaccine was developed, make sure that we manufactured under good manufacturing practice. We also had to compile a detailed dossier about how we are going to go about it. So that was approved in September, which allows us to start the trials now. The trial is going to happen in 5 sites across the country. The first part is going to be what we call a safety study, where we get volunteers that come, adults in this case, that come. Just over 100 volunteers will come to do a safety study to make sure that there are no adverse events that are expected. This is before we go on to the second part of the trial, which is likely to take place for most of 2026, where we take it into younger age groups, so young adults, and we're also going to try and get it into the pediatric population as well. And so there's a safety element, but also there's an element where we want to see if the vaccine actually works. And the way we need to see it work is that we will constantly be taking blood to see if the levels of antibodies that are expected are actually received through the trial subjects. So the trial will be taking place for the next 18 months. That's the best anticipated timeline.
Now, there is an expectation that obviously no harm will come to the subjects that you involve in this testing. How certain are you that every single individual who's part of this process will come out on the other side, if you will, unscathed? Or is there a margin of error, if you will?
So, I mean, you're asking me about the safety elements of it?
Correct. Of the individuals that are participating in this trial?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I said, this is a very highly regulated and governed space. And this is not only for our trial as Biovac, but it's really how trials are normally run. So the protocol in terms of how we are going to go about it has to undergo ethics approval. It had to undergo SAHPRA approval. And actually the trial subjects will be monitored not only when they come. We make sure that the physical checks that they're okay before they get to be given the vaccine. But they also go home and their contact details in terms of having checklists, in terms of if any adverse event were to happen, and they can contact the people that are running the trial at any time of the day. So that would happen continuously throughout the 18 months. And we are quite confident because this type of trial was done in other parts of the world by other companies. So we are quite confident that the safety element, we're not looking to get any adverse safety signals, but we still have to follow the thorough process in this process.
Morena, final thoughts. What is your ultimate vision? If this project is fully successful, what will the public health landscape for infectious diseases look like for the next generation of Africans?
Yeah. Absolutely. Hugo, it's I think it's going to be huge. So at the moment we're talking about cholera, but we know that other infectious diseases. Let's talk about HIV. HIV has been looking for a vaccine for a long time as the world, and we are unfortunately not near finding an HIV vaccine. We have promising new TB vaccines, and there's an anticipation that in the next 5 years there's going to be new TB vaccines. Those are developed by others overseas. But what we are doing with cholera essentially allows for, when those other high burden diseases and their vaccines come through, that the country can have the capability to even manufacture them locally from scratch. And there are many discussions that are happening around that. We have the likes of malaria. Now, we may not be a big malaria country, but we know that, it's quite a high burden. There are many countries that have a high burden on the continent around malaria. So essentially, this opens up, a capability that, going forward, we can be able to do with, call it day-to-day diseases. But what it also does, Hugo, is that it does give us a taste of pandemic readiness. Now, we don't know how the next pandemic, we don't know which virus it will be, we don't know how it will be. And but what we are doing is to at least try and enable the country to at least to respond to the next pandemic, whatever that's going to look like. At least it gives us a taste of what capability can exist.
Morena, appreciate your time exploring incredible uncharted territory. Thanks for speaking to us, Dr.